General Hospital spoilers for Monday, June 23 reveal that the wedding of Willow and Drew is being hastily arranged with unsettling urgency. And while it may be cloaked in the trappings of love and redemption, it is in truth a deeply disturbing culmination of manipulation, control, and emotional imbalance. Drew, intoxicated by the illusion that he has finally secured everything he's ever desired, moves forward with an almost fanatical joy. Unable, or unwilling, to acknowledge the truth about the crumbling world around him. He sees this union not just as a romantic milestone, but as a public affirmation of his victory over the chaos that has surrounded him since returning to Port Charles. To Drew, marrying Willow isn't about healing, it's about rewriting his own narrative. Casting himself as the hero, the savior, the man who put the pieces back together. And yet, in reality, all he's doing is cementing his dominance over a woman who is teetering on the edge of psychological collapse. Willow, still emotionally shattered from the devastating court decision that stripped her of custody over Wiley and Amelia, is in no condition to walk down any aisle. Her heart remains broken. Her mind clouded by grief, betrayal, and a gnawing emptiness that even she cannot fully articulate. And yet, instead of being allowed the time and space to heal, she's being pushed, some might say coerced, into a wedding that serves Drew's ambitions more than her emotional well-being. He has convinced her that marrying him is the only path forward. The only way to rebuild her life, the only hope she has of regaining access to her children. But this is not a partnership built on mutual love or respect. It is a power play masked as devotion. And the deeper Willow sinks into this illusion, the more disturbing it becomes. Behind Drew's smiles and lavish wedding plans lies something more sinister, a desperate need to control the narrative. To silence dissent, to ensure that Willow never slips from his grasp again. He's meticulously crafting a world in which he is not only Willow's partner, but her only lifeline. The only person she can trust, rely on, and ultimately be tethered to. Every detail of the wedding, from the guest list to the dress to the vows, is being orchestrated with surgical precision. Not for romance, but for reinforcement, proof that Drew is the victor in a war that no one else realizes is being fought. Meanwhile, the residents of Port Charles look on with a mix of confusion, concern, and quiet horror. Those who know Drew best, those who have seen the change in him since his return, can sense something is deeply wrong. His obsession with Willow. His willingness to manipulate legal systems, friendships, and even reality itself, has not gone unnoticed. And as the wedding day approaches, whispers grow louder. Some wonder if Willow is even capable of consenting to such a union in her current state. Others suspect Drew is hiding even more secrets, possibly leveraging unknown leverage to pressure Willow into marriage. And at the center of it all is Willow herself, isolated, emotionally raw, and increasingly unrecognizable from the vibrant, compassionate woman she once was. This wedding is not a beginning, it is an endpoint. It is the final act in a tragic descent that began the moment Willow lost her children and Drew saw an opportunity to replace her despair with dependence. And as the clock ticks closer to the ceremony, the sense of dread grows. Because what is being planned is not a celebration, but a containment. Not a union of hearts, but the sealing of a psychological prison. And once the vows are said, and the rings exchanged, the real consequences will begin to unfold, consequences that could dismantle what little remains of Willow's fractured identity and expose Drew for the man he has truly become. In the shadow of this impending ceremony, one thing has become clear: the wedding of Drew and Willow is not a symbol of hope, but of delusion. It is a portrait of two broken people clinging to a fantasy, drawn together not by love, but by shared damage and denial. And for all the flowers and promises and photo ops, the truth cannot be denied: this union is a tragedy in motion, and its aftermath may leave Port Charles more devastated than anyone can yet imagine. Emma had reached her limit. The once gentle spirit who had quietly carried the weight of broken friendships, childhood trauma, and unspoken love had transformed into a woman on the brink of confrontation. Tears of confusion and loss had hardened into a resolve sharpened by the realization that she was fighting for something far greater than a fractured romance. She was fighting to expose a betrayal that ran to the core of her identity and the heart of Port Charles. Across town, Jocelyn trespassed into Emma's memories like a ghost haunting a childhood home. She wore confidence like armor, laughter like a shield, but beneath the surface lay secrets Emma was determined to unearth. Their war was no longer personal, it had escalated into a duel over truth, power. And who would define the narrative? Jocelyn, once her confidant and sometimes rival for Joe's affections, had become complicit in something Emma believed to be far more sinister than mere infidelity or a shift in loyalty. Their emerging conflict was centered on a man who had entered their lives with charm and authority, only to reveal a hidden hunger for influence and control. His name, Dalton. From the beginning, Emma sensed something was off. The way he maneuvered between the city's elite, his deep interest in psychology, his obsession with adjusting personalities, including emotionally fraught individuals like Gio, Jocelyn, and Emma herself, without their informed consent sent shivers down her spine. She had brushed it off at first as eccentric ambition. But when stories began emerging, sparked by a frightened receptionist, hushed hallway gossip, and redacted patient records, Emma's unease hardened into determination. She started noticing the small signs, Jocelyn returning to town with private therapy sessions in her pocket, Joe's glazed expressions after intense conversations with Dalton, the strange proximity of Emily's emotional collapse to Dalton's personality enhancement programs. There were missing files, anomalies in hospital logs, a forgotten inoculation that dated to Jocelyn's last visit. Emma began to connect dots no one else saw, but as she dug deeper, she realized her pursuit of truth was putting her directly in the crosshairs. Jocelyn had already been in Dalton's inner circle. She defended his integrity and dismissed Emma as jealous, uninformed, overly emotional. That only fueled Emma's drive. She started visiting Dalton's offices, past the sign-in desk, combing trash bins, looking for clues. She reviewed surveillance logs, interviewed hospital staff, sifted through receipts, bills, insurance claims. Each day revealed new anomalies, prescriptions of untraceable drugs, therapy bills that didn't match claim records, visits logged without patient signatures. Each newfound element was proof that Dalton was manipulating people, not helping them. The tension between Emma and Jocelyn grew electric. During the few true strained gatherings they shared, Emma's gaze would linger on Jocelyn's expression, and Jocelyn would return smiles that didn't reach her eyes. Their conversations, once warm with nostalgia and shared history, became tight-lipped barbs as Emma probed for explanations. "What is it with you and Dalton?" she would ask, her voice trembling with anger she barely controlled. Jocelyn would respond with a veneer of dismissal, "I'm fine. He's just been a friend. You should understand that we all want help sometimes." But Emma saw the signs, the late-night Skype sessions, the unusual quiet around Jocelyn when Dalton was near, the furtive glances exchanged between them. Emma would force Gio into casual conversations at the Metro Court, watching him drift when Dalton was mentioned. Only then did Gio admit, "He wanted me to be more confident," he confessed. "That I could be better, more controlled, more like the men Dalton admires." Emma's instinct screamed, this was manipulation, not therapy. While the emotional battlefield roiled between them, a darker secret began to crystallize. Dalton had been conducting social experiments disguised as therapy sessions, gathering data on vulnerability and trust so he could shape people's behaviors and, possibly, leverage their psychological dependencies. If that was true, he had weaponized the emotional turmoil of Port Charles for his own gain. Emma's awareness of the risk surged when she found a flash drive tucked in a drawer of Dalton's office, files titled Personality Adjustment Protocols, with logs naming Jocelyn, Gio, even herself as subjects. The final protocol was dated the next day, matching the biggest fundraiser of the season, when Dalton would be center stage. According to the logs, something big was to happen, a public reveal, but the details were redacted. With each discovery, Emma's internal world trembled. She realized the confrontation with Jocelyn could no longer be personal, it had to be a battle between truth and manipulation. She prepared, gathering evidence, confiding in Anna, contacting Carly. trying to frame a narrative that would unmask Dalton and free Jocelyn from his hold. But she also had to face Jocelyn herself, someone she still cared about, someone once loved. Now potentially compromised. All tensions reached a breaking point at a charity gala hosted at the Metro Court. Emma watched from the upper balcony as Jocelyn moved through the crowd, radiant. Her arm in Dalton's. The sight brought a storm of emotion, sorrow, anger, love, betrayal. Emma descended, clutching the flash drive, determined to choose her moment. Their confrontation occurred in a dim side hallway. Jocelyn, sensing something was wrong, tensed. Emma held out the drive. You need to know what you're signing on for. Jocelyn laughed. But her voice lacked warmth. Emma, you don't understand. He helped me. He helped us all. Emma stepped forward. He's going to control every part of your personality. He's already listed you as a subject. We've all been experimented on, and you don't even know what's really being done. Her voice cracked, the rage spilling out after months of silent anger. I loved you, Joss. But I can't stand watching you be his puppet. For a moment, the two women stood facing each other, separated by evidence, faith, and deep emotion. Then Dalton himself appeared, claiming Jocelyn's arm. Emma read the tension in Jocelyn's eyes, and with a quiet resolve, said, You have to help me expose him. Whether Jocelyn would step forward with the truth or retreat into denial was the moment Emma had been preparing for. In the weeks that followed, Port Charles braced itself. Emma and Jocelyn's once solid bond fractured, splintering into an epic battle over Dalton's control. Their confrontation forced secrets into the open. The hospital became an interrogation chamber. Anna and Carly watched from opposite sides, each wary of how public it would all become. And Dalton? He stood at the center, a man whose carefully curated guise of compassion was about to shatter. This wasn't just about past hurts. It was about the weaponization of affection, the corruption of trust, and the terrifying ease with which someone could mold vulnerable hearts. Emma's crusade wasn't motivated by revenge, it was fueled by the need to save Jocelyn, Gio, and anyone else Dalton had manipulated. And as the battle lines hardened, it became clear. Port Charles would never be the same. The secret of Dalton's experiments had been exposed, the war for emotional autonomy had begun. And at its core was a girl who refused to lose her friend or her truth. Nina was growing increasingly restless. The battle lines had been drawn long ago, but the players were shifting. The strategies becoming bolder, and the risks far more personal. Her hatred for Drew had morphed into something else, an obsession, a searing need to undo him at all costs. Every sleepless night she spent staring out her penthouse window overlooking Port Charles only strengthened her conviction that Drew needed to fall. Not just lose. Not just suffer. But fall so completely that no one would dare resurrect his image again. But Nina knew that she couldn't do it alone. Her influence had waned since Michael had turned on her. And the Quartermaines had rallied behind Drew as some savior of the Corinthos legacy. But there was one person whose disdain for Drew nearly matched her own, and whose reach extended deeply into the very foundation of the Quartermaine family. Tracy. Ruthless. Cunning. Efficient. Nina had once feared Tracy as a rival, but now she saw her as the only possible ally in an increasingly unstable war. And so, Nina approached her, not with flowers, not with pleasantries, but with leverage. It started over brunch at the Metro Court, though nothing about their conversation was casual. Nina laid it all out. The evidence she had that Drew had manipulated Jason's release. The speculation that Drew had tampered with Michael's court statements. And a carefully edited recording that could paint Drew as the orchestrator of multiple custody battles, including his own with Willow. Tracy sipped her tea and said nothing for a long time. She simply nodded once, curtly, and replied, I'm listening. From that moment, the alliance began, not with fanfare, but with a single, mutual understanding: Drew had to be removed. Tracy didn't care much about Drew's personal affairs, but she did care about the Quartermaine name, and the chaos Drew was dragging it through. His obsession with control. His attempts to merge Corinthos and Quartermain assets, his constant undermining of Brooke Lynn's role at deception. He was unraveling decades of foundation, and Tracy would not have it. Together, Mina and Tracy began orchestrating what could only be described as a political takedown masquerading as familial reckoning. Tracy activated her contacts in the judicial sphere, while Mina leveraged the remnants of her media empire to slowly disseminate stories, anonymous, of course, about Drew's past transgressions, painting him as emotionally unstable and dangerously obsessive. They fed breadcrumbs to Sunny, whose patience for Drew had already worn thin. They whispered in Ava's ear. They pushed doubts into Willow's mind through carefully placed therapists and conversations disguised as concern. It was slow, methodical, and merciless. Meanwhile, Drew was flying high. The wedding to Willow was moving forward. He'd convince her it was the only way to prove her stability to the courts and reclaim their children. He made overtures to Michael, promising peace and inclusion. He even began drafting a new will. One that would place Willow and the kids as sole beneficiaries of his assets, a move that would ultimately hand control of Aurora over to Willow, should anything happen to him. And something would. Mina and Tracy began pushing the final pieces into place. They couldn't kill Drew, that would be reckless, messy, and untraceable in the way that truly powerful people preferred. But they could destroy his image. They could break his credibility. And most importantly, they could make him turn on himself. The plan was cruel, but elegant. Introduce a forged psychiatric evaluation into the court system, one that suggested Drew had developed a form of narcissistic delusion following his prison time and rescue. Make it seem like he believed he was owed more than any man should, that he saw the children as assets, not lives. At the same time, they leaked a fake security report indicating Drew had been seen near Willow's psychiatric facility, in a part of the building restricted to authorized personnel only. Tracy ensured the right judge saw the report. Mina made sure the right social workers took it seriously. Soon, Willow found herself being questioned, not about her parenting, but about her safety. Did she feel threatened? Was Drew perhaps pressuring her into the wedding? She denied it, of course, but the seed had been planted. Drew, unaware, continued forward. He booked the flowers. He bought the ring. He practiced his vows in the mirror, unaware that half the town was beginning to believe he was unstable. That he was dangerous. That he was not the hero they once believed had returned from captivity, but a broken, hollow man attempting to rebuild his identity with the lives of those around him. It all came to a head the night before the wedding. Drew's apartment was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but one thing was left behind, a single page from the fake psychiatric file. Left on his kitchen counter. Just his name. Just a diagnosis. And a signature that didn't belong to any doctor he'd ever seen. He knew then that someone was trying to ruin him. But he didn't know who. And he didn't know how deeply they'd already succeeded. As the wedding day arrived, Mina and Tracy stood apart at the back of the chapel, like two conductors watching a symphony collapse. Willow entered in a daze, her eyes clouded with doubt she could no longer suppress. Michael, seated in the third pew, kept glancing toward the door, half expecting Jason to burst in with news that would stop the ceremony. But Jason never came. Not yet. When the priest asked if there were any objections, no one spoke. But silence does not mean peace. And as Drew turned to face Willow, just seconds away from declaring his vows, someone screamed. A figure darted past the altar. And then a flash, a blinding, terrible flash, and the sound of a shot echoed through the chapel. Drew collapsed, his white shirt blooming red. Chaos followed. People screamed. Willow fell to her knees. Michael rushed forward. Mina covered her mouth in faux horror. Tracy simply stepped back into the shadows, her expression unreadable. The shot didn't kill Drew. But it didn't have to. What mattered wasn't his survival, it was the message. He was no longer safe. No longer trusted. And in the wake of the attack, the court would place the children far away from the man who'd nearly died at his own wedding. And so, Nina and Tracy retreated, their job nearly complete. The alliance had proven effective, cold, and surgical. But what neither of them knew, what not even Sonny knew, was that the gunman had not been hired. He had acted on his own. A former WSB agent whose life Drew had destroyed during a Black Ops mission. And he was not done yet. As for Willow, she would spend the night alone, still in her wedding gown, seated in a hospital hallway, holding on to the ring Drew never got to place on her finger. She was no longer sure who to trust. But she was beginning to realize that maybe she hadn't been the one losing her mind, maybe Drew had been manipulating her all along. And that realization, though whispered, was the most dangerous one of all. Because if she turned on Drew, there would be no redemption. Not even from the grave. Carly had long learned to trust her instincts, and lately, those instincts were screaming at her that something was deeply wrong. Ever since Sasha had re-entered their lives, seemingly healed and stable after her prolonged psychological breakdown, there had been an eerie shift in the energy around the Quartermain mansion. On the surface, everything appeared to be calm. Sasha was warm, attentive, overly gracious. Especially when around Michael and the children. But beneath that carefully constructed facade, Carly sensed something darker lurking, especially in Sasha's interactions with baby Daisy. At first, it was the little things, how Sasha would linger too long beside Daisy's crib, the way her eyes seemed to glaze over with emotion that didn't quite register as maternal. There was an intensity in the way she touched the child's blanket, a possessiveness in her voice when she spoke about Daisy. Carly chalked it up to Sasha's grief over losing her own baby in the past. But as days passed, her unease grew. When she confronted Michael, he brushed off her concerns, insisting that Sasha was simply adjusting and bonding with the children in her own way. But Carly couldn't let it go. Something about Sasha's gaze haunted her, especially the way she looked at Daisy when she thought no one was watching. The first real warning came when Carly discovered that some of Daisy's belongings had been rearranged, not by the nanny, not by Michael, and certainly not by accident. A toy placed in a different crib, a pacifier missing and then reappearing in Sasha's coat pocket. When Carly gently asked about it, Sasha laughed, brushing it off as a mix-up. But Carly saw the flicker of panic behind her smile. That was when she decided to dig deeper. She began observing Sasha more closely, tracking her movements through the house. Listening to conversations, analyzing her behavior like a detective following a hunch she desperately wished wasn't true. Then came the second sign. Sasha had approached Michael with a recommendation that Daisy might benefit from early intervention therapy, because of what she claimed were emerging signs of emotional imbalance. Carly was livid. Daisy was perfectly healthy and developing beautifully. There was absolutely nothing wrong with her. Why would Sasha fabricate such a claim? That's when Carly's fears crystallized. Sasha wasn't just grieving or traumatized, she was fixated. She had formed an unhealthy emotional bond with Daisy, one that had crossed over from maternal empathy into obsession. One night, long after the household had gone to sleep, Carly quietly slipped into Sasha's room, driven by a sense of urgency she couldn't ignore. What she found confirmed every dread she had suppressed. Tucked beneath the mattress was a weathered, leather-bound journal, Sasha's private thoughts, scrawled in increasingly erratic handwriting. Page after page spoke of voices in her head. Of a child who cried out to her from the shadows, of a destiny that bound her to Daisy. "They'll try to keep us apart," one entry read. "But she knows I'm her real mother. She remembers. I see it in her eyes." Carly's blood ran cold. It was no longer just suspicion, it was proof of a fractured mind unraveling behind closed doors. But the most chilling moment came when Carly, frozen behind the nursery door, overheard Sasha whispering to Daisy in the dark. "Shoo, baby, don't cry. Mommy's here now. We'll go away together soon, just the two of us. They don't understand us. But we'll be free." Carly's heart pounded as she stepped back, her mind racing with scenarios. If Sasha acted, if she disappeared with the baby, if no one believed her. She couldn't risk waiting another moment. This wasn't just delusion, it was dangerous intent disguised as maternal instinct. Carly knew confronting Sasha outright could push her over the edge. Instead, she began documenting everything: journals, dates, conversations, even subtle recordings. She reached out to Jason and Sunny, alerting them without raising alarms in front of Michael, who remained frustratingly loyal to Sasha, blind to the risk she posed. But the facade would soon crack. Carly could already see it. Sasha's erratic behavior was escalating, her speech more frantic, her mood swings sharper. The lines between her fantasies and reality were blurring. As the pressure mounted, Carly found herself in an impossible position. She had to protect Daisy, warn Michael, and expose Sasha without triggering a full-blown crisis. The weight of it all pressed heavily on her. There was no room for error, because the moment Sasha sensed she was losing control, she might do something no one could undo. And in the shadows of the Quartermaine mansion, behind lullabies sung with trembling devotion and a mother's tears that weren't hers to cry, the countdown had already begun. Carly could feel it. The storm was coming, and if she didn't act soon, Sasha might take Daisy into the dark, and no one would know where to look.